Hey YNR fans! Waving hand, welcome to YNR Trends, your go-to spot for the juiciest Young and the Restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama you can't stop talking about. From surprise returns to scandalous twists, we break it all down for you, every day. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. Following a significant Audra Charles outburst, Kyle Abbott will arrange a marriage proposal to salvage his relationship with Claire Newman, according to the Young and the Restless recap for Thursday, August 28th. If Victor Newman is genuinely backing off Kyle and Claire's relationship, Jack Abbott at Society will pressure him to rip up the $5 million deal Kyle signed. Victor, on the other hand, will not ruin a perfectly fine contract and will ultimately have one of his usual run-ins with Jack. After talking with Jack, Diane Jenkins Abbott will find out that he wants to give Victor a dose of his own medicine, but she is concerned that he would worsen the situation by attacking Victor. Kane Ashby will also be discussed, although Jack won't be overly worried about him. On Thursday's episode of YNR, Victor will text Kane outside to inquire about his readiness to continue their cooperation against Chabot. Victoria Newman will talk to Nikki Newman about her concerns about Claire having to grieve in life without Cole Howard at the coffee shop. Since Nikki believes that Claire could benefit from a promotion at this time, she will disclose her intention to elevate Claire to the position of junior executive in a certain division, referring to it as the next step up the corporate ladder. Claire will brief Kyle at the Abbott estate on how she told Nate Hastings about Audra's behavior in front of Audra, who denied everything. Claire won't allow Kyle to continue avoiding the topic and will ultimately inquire if there is anything he hasn't told her about Nice. Kyle will acknowledge that he permitted a kiss with Audra in France after reflecting on Diane and Jack's pressure for him to come clean. Claire will believe there was more because Kyle claims he was disgusted the entire time. To sell the trap, Kyle will imply that he must go along with it for a while, but he will reassure Claire that Audra is unimportant to him. Nevertheless, since he earlier assured her that nothing occurred, Claire will be angry with him for lying. Claire will complain that Audra was more truthful than Kyle and question whether he ever would have spoken clean if she hadn't pushed him. Kyle will be pleading with Claire to reassure him that he didn't make things worse because he is desperate to make this right. Since she couldn't help Kyle feel better at the moment, Claire won't think she can say that and will leave him. Claire will reveal that Kyle recently admitted to kissing Audra in Nice when she meets Victoria and Nikki at the coffee shop. Claire will describe their exchange and consider how Jordan's parenting style caused her to be triggered by Kyle's falsehoods. Although Nikki will admit that Kyle erred, she will still believe that he genuinely cares for Claire. Claire will need time to process everything, though, and she won't be ready to forgive Kyle just yet. When they finally get together at the ranch, Nikki will confront Victor about his intentions in treating Kyle. Victor will admit that their rivalry will never end since Nikki will believe that it was always more about his fight with Jack. Returning to Kyle, he will interrupt Diane and Jack's lunch to confess to Claire that he kissed Audra in Nice. Kyle is committed to making amends and will explain Claire's terrible response. Diane will ask Kyle to wait for Claire, but Kyle will feel pressured to make a big gesture right now. Kyle will announce that he is going to ask Claire to marry him when Jack and Diane are curious about his plans. According to teasers on The Young and the Restless, Kyle's marriage proposal might cause a stir soon. We'll see if it results in engagement news or further issues. The weight of what he was going to do weighed heavily on Kyle's chest in a manner he hadn't felt since the day he stood at the altar years ago, but he had never been the type of man to doubt himself, at least not in public. Even the strongest hearts were prone to faltering in Genoa City, particularly when ambition, betrayal, and love were entangled in a knot so tight it felt like it may smother them. He closed the velvet box that had been in his bedside drawer for days, his hands trembling a little as the diamond within gleamed in the little light like a secret about to burst. When he initially got the idea, it had seemed obvious: ask Claire to marry him, demonstrate to her how committed he was, and build a future that seemed bright in ways his previous relationships could never maintain. However, Kyle was all too aware that timing was crucial. Additionally, he had never had good timing in Genoa City. The women Kyle had previously fell for were not like Claire. Claire carried a softness that belied the tempest she had experienced growing up in Newman, always on the edge of belonging, whereas Summer had been fire and light and Lola had been firm and grounded. Kyle found in Claire not only a mate but also an opportunity for redemption, someone who knew what it was like to be evaluated based on hushed histories and family legacies. She was scarred, and he saw his own mirror in those wounds, which is why he was drawn to her, not because she was flawless. His heart faltered as he practiced the words he planned to say that night because Audra was the other urgent truth that was all around him. Audra Charles was not the type of lady you just ignored. She had the acerbic, intoxicating, and dangerous qualities of a long-kept secret. After his marriage to Summer ended, Kyle had persuaded himself that their tumultuous, passionate, and risky entanglement was only a diversion. However, Audra was never one to keep things tidy. With a single raised eyebrow or a smirk that implied she knew things you hoped she didn't, she had a way of coming back, demanding attention, and causing mayhem. And Audra had made the decision to blow up just as Kyle was preparing for the biggest jump of his life with Claire. The blow-up had begun modestly, as was always the case with her. After a scathing statement regarding Claire's lack of maturity and a sarcastic term directed at society, there were murmurs that Kyle was foolishly pursuing something delicate. Audra, on the other hand, never compromised when she desired destruction. She positioned herself against him, accused him of duping her, and implied that she had ammo that could ruin his plans with Claire before they had ever started. As he stood there, staring into Audra's dark eyes, Kyle understood that this proposal was more than just a proposal of love, it was a test of his capacity to break free from the toxic patterns that had defined him for too long. Being Jack Abbott's kid for a lifetime had taught Kyle how to squeeze out of confined confines. He had learned how to change course when things became tough from his father's business disputes, his family's ongoing scandals, and his own missteps due to adultery and treachery. This time, however, it wasn't about maintaining a family name or saving face. It was about keeping Claire safe and preventing the poisoning of what they were building. Audra never bluffed, and this time she wasn't. Even though Kyle wanted to dismiss her warnings as just another desperate attempt to gain attention, he secretly worried about what she may do if she felt abandoned. Nevertheless, love had a way of making a guy more determined. Later that night, Kyle found himself in Claire's company, watching her chuckle quietly at something Johnny had said. Her smile warmed a space that had been oppressive only a few moments before. Although she wasn't flawless, her honesty drew him in like a magnet. He remembered the ring, now concealed in his pocket, burning a hole as though it were pushing him forward. He reflected on how Audra's voice had attempted to cast doubt on him and how her instability had almost led him to believe he wasn't deserving of stability. After giving Claire a close look, he realized he couldn't allow Audra to win. Not now. The late summer air hung heavy with the possibilities of what might happen when Kyle finally invited Claire to come outside with him. At first, his sentences faltered due to more nervousness than he cared to acknowledge, but Claire's eyes supported him in a way that no other person's could. He told her how she had transformed him and how her peaceful courage had taught him that there was more to life than conflict and treachery. He talked about how, in particular, when the world was harsh, he wanted to be the man who supported her. The diamond caught the moonlight as he knelt with the velvet box in his palm. The world froze for a moment, as though even the twitching heart of Genoa City had stopped to listen to her response. Before she could even speak, Claire let out a quiet gasp and covered her lips with her hand, threatening to cry. Kyle's entire life appeared to be on the precipice between the healing promise of Claire's love and the destructive draw of Audra's fire at that moment of suspended silence. A persistent thread in the show's long-running plot is the complex and emotionally fraught relationships between the Newman family and its colleagues' personal and professional lives. Kyle Abbott's marriage proposal to Summer Newman, which was purposefully, and possibly unconsciously, planned to get him out of the increasingly precarious and hazardous position with Audra Charles, is one particularly poignant series of events. This move was a complicated tactical turn, a desperate detour that had far-reaching and enduring effects on everyone concerned, rather than a straightforward, romantic gesture that happened in a vacuum. One must first recognize the hazardous position Kyle found himself in as a result of his involvement with Audra in order to fully comprehend the significance of his request. Characterized by her drive, wit, and impressive grasp of corporate power dynamics, Audra Charles had recognized Kyle as a valuable, albeit erratic, asset in her own strategy. Mutual opportunism served as the foundation for their collaboration, which frequently blurred the boundaries between the highly personal and the professional. They were two players who were negotiating the perilous seas of Jabot and Newman Lock, using their personal ties and insider information against the same families that hired them. Kyle frequently felt that the strict structures of the Abbott dynasty deprived him the sense of agency and control that this collaboration provided. He had the ability to work covertly and resist his father Jack Abbott's and his ex-wife Summer's public tactics. Nevertheless, the instability of such a collaboration is its inherent danger. Despite being a strong and useful ally, Audra is ultimately a mercenary. Her techniques might be brutally practical, and she is committed to her own advancement. The likelihood of a disastrous explosion climbed exponentially as their plans became more ambitious. Their entire operation could have been exposed by a single mistake, a piece of information that was leaked, or a straightforward miscalculation, which would have resulted in not just professional destruction but also extreme personal humiliation. The stakes were very high for Kyle. His name and his place in the Abbott family and Jabot are important to who he is. The delicate relationship he had worked so hard to re-establish with his father would have been destroyed by a public scandal involving corporate espionage and betrayal, particularly with someone like Audra. He would have been cut off from the foundation of his family's influence and history. Kyle experienced severe anxiety as a result of this increasing strain. He knew that the house of cards he and Audra were constructing might fall apart at any time, so he was constantly on edge. The Audra blow-up wasn't a singular incident, rather, it was an inevitable storm cloud that was threatening to bring about both personal and professional disaster. Kyle's proposal to Summer must be interpreted in light of this growing sense of dread. Essentially, the proposal was a panic button. It was an extreme, life-changing choice taken out of a frantic need for a way out rather than out of a place of serene, certain love. Summer stood for legality, security, and safety. She was the complete opposite of the perilous, uncertain world he and Audra lived in. Going back to Summer meant going back to a known quantity, to a love that was firmly anchored in family and history, no matter how complex. Kyle's proposal was an attempt to forcefully reorient his whole life. He was forming a new, more potent duty, marriage, that would break the Gordian knot of his tie with Audra. This action has several strategic and psychological benefits. First of all, it was an open pledge of loyalty. He was openly preferring the Newman-Abbott alliance over any dubious activities with Audra by pledging himself to Summer. It served as a warning to himself and everyone else about his allegiances. Second, it made the distance between him and Audra nearly impenetrable. How could he sustain a hidden, high-risk partnership with another woman while engaged to be married to Summer Newman? The interaction served as a buffer, a valid reason to keep his distance from Audra and the upcoming explosion. It allowed him to go sideways into another, more socially acceptable type of commitment, allowing him to wriggle out and escape. The term wiggle is really well chosen. It suggests a certain lack of candor, a tactic that is ingenious but possibly not totally moral. Kyle did not address the matter directly with Audra. He did not terminate their collaboration by speaking openly or by taking responsibility for their deeds. He wriggled out instead. Understanding Kyle's character requires that he find a lateral way out of the direct confrontation and possible consequences of the blow-up. This was the ultimate avoidance strategy, and he is frequently motivated by a desire to save himself his father's embarrassment and contempt. He believed that the problems of a rekindled marriage with Summer were better than the emotional and professional destruction that the Audra scenario offered, so he exchanged one complicated situation for another. But the plan wasn't exactly a fresh start. Instead of being a solution, it was a transplant of issues. A new set of severe issues was brought about right away by Summer's engagement. Summer was coming out of a very emotional phase in which she had thought her husband, Chance Chancellor, had passed away. Her decision to re-enter a relationship with Kyle was complicated by her own unresolved past, which included betrayals in the past and the constant influence of their influential families. Moreover, the engagement only buried the past with Audra alive rather than erasing it. A ticking time bomb was created by the secrets, the conspiracies, and Audra's close awareness of Kyle's weaknesses and behavior. A romantic act, no matter how large, would not be enough to disregard or nullify Audra as a woman. She was more knowledgeable about the game than most, thus she would have correctly seen Kyle's suggestion as a tactical retreat and a rejection. This probably made her more resentful and made her a greater threat. The blow-up had a new and more intimate spark, if it was already coming. Kyle had merely given the detonator to someone who now had a very personal reason to use it. He had not defused the bomb. As a result, Kyle's life became unstable due to the engagement. He appeared to be the obedient, idealistic fiancé, reigniting a timeless romance for everyone to witness. Under the surface, he was a man who was always watching for the consequences of the Audra circumstance he had attempted to avoid, living in continual fear of his past deeds coming back to haunt him. His connection with Summer was severely strained from the start due to this internal conflict. Transparency and unflinching devotion should be the cornerstones of a marriage proposal, but this one was built on evasion and deception. His engagement was fundamentally unstable because of the specter of Audra and their unresolved business. This decision's faulty character is demonstrated by its long-term effects. It started a series of events that eventually led to the truth leaking out. Unsustainable stress resulted from the strain of upholding the appearance of a flawless reconciliation while worrying about being exposed by his former ally. It affected his interactions with his family, his status in Jabot, and his relationship with Summer. Now, every business choice and every exchange with Audra was seen through the prism of this obscure past. The plan, which was meant to be the final solution to one issue, ended up being the root cause of many more. It illustrates a recurrent theme in the story: attempts to handle personal and business issues by taking quick cuts, deceiving others, and avoiding them always result in more complicated situations. Addressing issues head-on, honestly, and with a readiness to accept the repercussions are necessary for authentic resolution. In his quest to avoid the repercussions, Kyle wrapped his future in the precise web he was attempting to break free from. More broadly, Kyle's suggestion is a microcosm of how interpersonal connections are used to further the power conflicts in the show's setting. Marriage and love are frequently strategic instruments used to neutralize threats, establish alliances, and secure corporate positions in addition to being issues of the heart. This was exemplified by Kyle's move. In the hopes that its social and familial significance would hide him from his other acts, he was using the institution of marriage as a shield. It draws attention to how difficult it is to distinguish between personal and professional life in this day and age, when a marriage proposal can be a strategic business decision and a boardroom plan might be determined by a bedroom secret. Summer's emotional consequences are just as important. It would be a terrible betrayal to learn that a proposal, which she probably wanted to think was a sincere declaration of love and commitment, was at least partly driven by a desire to avoid a scandal at work in another lady. It turns her from a cherished companion into a piece in a bigger scheme, a haven amid a storm that someone else created. Their rekindled connection was poisoned from the beginning by the underlying dishonesty, which made its eventual turbulence practically a self-fulfilling prophecy. In the end, examining Kyle's marriage proposal as a means of escaping the Audra outburst exposes a seriously weak character choice motivated by self-preservation and fear. Without considering the long-term structural integrity of his connections, it was a Hail Mary pass intended to prevent an imminent disaster. Only in the most limited and immediate sense was the act of wiggling out successful. It could have postponed a confrontation with Audra for a while, but it didn't stop it. In fact, it ensured that when it did happen, it would be laced with a stronger mixture of personal treachery and professional competition. By entwining the fate of two significant organizations with the personal betrayals of its principals, the concept added a new and more intricate dimension of drama. It serves as evidence that when someone tries to prevent one explosion, they frequently unintentionally create the conditions for a bigger one, which guarantees that the shockwaves will reverberate throughout their entire life, destroying all relationships and burying all secrets forever. The entire scenario is a powerful example of how poorly to handle a crisis, emphasizing the unavoidable cost of utilizing interpersonal connections as strategic instruments in an endless struggle for survival and dominance.